So it's kind of weird. The very first time that Oasis met, to wax historic here for a second, was January 2nd, 2016. We met at Quarter Bakery in Orem, and there had been a few people who had chatted on a variety of different Facebook groups. There was the Utah Valley Post-Mormon group, there was the Mormon Stories group, there were a few different groups that people had posted on and were interested in the idea of a secular community and what possibilities there were. Up until that point, Cache Valley had already gotten the community of good concept going. A bunch of them had met together and they just had a community together for the sake of community and for really no other reason. Which I guess isn't all that different when you consider people who just hang out because they want to hang out. But a community that meets on Sunday mornings in a pew-style fashion generally isn't just to chill and hang out. It usually has some dogmatic purpose, which isn't bad. But there were a number of us who wanted to try something different, so we did. And it's been a year and 3-4 months now, and this is the first time that I've had the chance to speak at Oasis, even though I was there the first time. And I've been doing my best to act as president for Utah Valley Oasis and build what I can. And so I'm excited to talk a little bit, even if it is about this guy and his methodology for how he became, how he was able to get the election to work in his favor. And so a few kind of pre-notes, a prologue, if you will. I grew up in North Wyoming and got my bachelor's degree in Japanese. I used it for about a year after I graduated at an MLM up in Pleasant Grove and realized that the only market for someone speaking Japanese in Utah is to be part of an MLM or to translate patents about diapers and tampons. And so because I wasn't super keen on that, I decided that I needed to try and move somewhere else. And so I eventually was able to, by some luck and also by being intentional about what I was trying to do, I was able to find my way into digital marketing in 2011. And so started off coaching people on how to set up e-commerce businesses, because I had done some work on Amazon and eBay. And from there, worked at an agency in American Fork, moved my way to backcountry.com doing their paid search up there. And then I work at Adobe. And in addition to doing some freelance, I consulted Adobe helping large enterprise companies set up their use the software that Adobe has to help them market on Google, Bing, Facebook, web properties, apps, all over the internet. And so that being my background, I'm pretty close to, I have my ear pretty close to the ground with what goes on in the digital marketing world, and especially with Google and Facebook, especially around kind of paid marketing. And what I mean by paid marketing is, if you ever look at a Google search page, you'll notice that there are generally, unless you look at, if you're looking at like product ads, if you just look on Google on how do I tie a bowline knot or something like that, there's usually two sections. There's paid ads up at the top and at the very bottom, and then in the middle there are what are called organic or natural search results. And that's just where Google is going out on the internet and trying to find what they think are the websites that most closely represent that idea. And I generally, for the most part, work in the paid sections, both on Facebook and on Google and throughout the internet. And what I have to talk about today is largely about that idea. Again, I've been doing this for 6 years, and in the 6 years that I've been doing this, the way that this has been done, the way that the Trump team and how they went about it is pretty unprecedented, and their approach to it was implemented both in the Brexit campaign as claimed by the big data company that Trump hired, as well as the Trump campaign. So we're going to talk about it a little bit. And so when I first looked at I mean, to tell a really short story, the day that the results of the election were announced on November, whatever day it was, I was sitting in Strap Tank and with a few friends, and we sat there watching, and I didn't include this graphic in the presentation, but I remember looking at Nate Silver's chart on 538 and showing the probability that Hillary Clinton was going to win, and it had her at, for the couple months or even a couple weeks leading up to November, I think it was 8th, had her at an 80% chance of winning, and had Donald Trump at a 20% chance. And so, being the Hillary supporter that I was really excited about that. I thought, this is good. You know, if I were working on a marketing campaign and I knew that it had an 80% success rate, then I felt really good about the marketing that I was throwing toward the objective. And yet that obviously wasn't the case. And so I started to go, what was it? You know, what was Donald Trump doing differently? Like, what the hell, guys? How did this happen? And obviously there were lots of people who were super stoked and good for them, and there were lots of people that weren't. And the question I kept hearing was how, because it seemed like all the right dominoes were falling in the right place. And so I started looking at a couple different things, and I'll only throw a couple up here, but how much did Hillary Clinton raise versus Donald Trump? And she kicked his ass. She raised a lot more money. Even though he has lots of money, she did really well. And if you look at how much she spent, she also spent about double what he did. And, you know, so she obviously had the cash. She wasn't strapped on funds to get it done. And so was he more efficient in, like, people? Like, did he have more feet on the ground? And that wasn't the case. She had a big workforce. And so what did he do, right? And so a lot of people will point to his social media following, and yeah, he had a lot more. He had a few million more in all the major categories. He had, you know, a few million more on Twitter. He had almost double the Facebook likes, and you know, he had double the Instagram following, which I don't think was as impactful. And there's a number of things that people could say to this. They'd be like, well, that's about the spread that she had more votes than him in the popular vote, right? Which is true. You know, it was a few million or so. But in the end, you know, when we're talking about, you know, both of them had 50-odd million votes, I don't know if 10 million followers on Twitter is going to be the indicator that we can point to. Maybe we can say it's directional. We could say, well, you know, if we were to extrapolate this out to the total number of followers who aren't necessarily on, you know, following him on Facebook, maybe. But I don't think that that's exactly what we're going to see. And so to preface a little bit, I'm basing a lot of this on a couple of articles that I read that led me to look up a few different things that Donald Trump employed. And I'm not really going to go into the story behind it in terms of the characters involved, but I will attach a link of the major article that got me going on this, and you can go read it and cry for a couple days after that. So the core concept behind what Donald Trump employed was the concept of psychometrics. If you're familiar with psychology at all and the study of psychology, it's basically the idea of looking at a person and all the different psychological traits, characteristics that they have in their minds, and giving them a number, giving them a probability of if you were to look at someone's score, how probable are they to be a certain something. And so if there's generally a category of 5, and I don't have them up here. Again, I can attach that. I believe I attached it at the end. But it's usually things like openness, extrovertedness, conscientiousness, and a couple other things. And neuroticism, coincidentally enough. And so,
did you say neuroticism?
Neuroticism, yeah, it's one of the core psychometric concepts. And so, looking at to kind of go back in time a little bit, how would we identify someone's psychometric profile. When looking at an individual, you would fill out a survey. This is kind of like the, like what kind of person are you? What are your strengths thing, right? So you take a survey, and it would characterize you. Here they are: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, and you can attach a few others. What are your fears? What's your sexual orientation? What's your political preference? It starts to give a profile to who you are, to what you are, on kind of a numeric level, right? And so the question then is, how does that work now? So what people began to ask is, where do you take surveys about yourself on a daily basis?
Click.
Every single day when we tap our phones. A quote from Michael Kaczynski, who's the brains behind this idea of what we're about to talk about. He said, our smartphone is a vast psychological questionnaire that we are constantly filling out, both consciously and unconsciously. Not only is it the likes, it's how we're browsing. It's if we scroll through something really fast, it means we don't care about something. If we, it can even detect sometimes if you're fidgety or not. And now especially there's just legislation that was passed this last week allowing companies more freedom to sell your personal browsing data, even more so than it was before. And we'll talk about how much there was. And I have to be clear about this. I work in this industry. I work with companies that do this all the time. And this is really good for me because I have to make sure that I'm being ethical about what I do. I have to make sure that I'm not using people's personally identifiable information. And so, especially for a company like Adobe where I work, there are checks in place to make sure that we're being ethical about using people's data. Having said that, it's going to sound sketchy, the way that people look at it. And I understand, and that's why I feel like it's good to dialogue about it. And so, let's talk about this. How do you take someone's personal Facebook profile and get their psychometric profile? What this guy did, Michael Kaczynski, is he just for fun, just for a study, he put a survey out on the internet, and he said, fill this out and get your psychometric profile. Oh, also, would you care to give us your Facebook data? And people were like, sure, why not? And so they did. It was like 10, 20 people that turned into millions of people who decided to fill it out because they were like, this is interesting. Here, have my Facebook data. All of a sudden, they'd broken Enigma. They had been able to take what previously was done with surveys and use the models that they had built off of those surveys and connect it up with Facebook data. Now they don't need surveys, they just have to look at your Facebook profile. Here's an example. In 2012, when he was doing on this, Kaczynski proved that on the basis of an average of 68 Facebook likes, it was possible to predict their skin color with 95% accuracy, their sexual orientation with 88% accuracy, the affiliation to the Democratic or Republican Party with 85% accuracy. And to paraphrase, it included other things like intelligence, religious affiliation, alcohol, cigarette, drug use, as well as if someone's parents were divorced, just by looking at your Facebook profile. Not looking at what you're posting, but just by the things that you like. Just looking at the data, right? And so, if I were to go back, I believe that...
So this doesn't take into account anyone's own posts, just what they like about it.
Correct. It's about the things that you simply hit like on, right? And so, if I were to go through this just a little bit to show just how well it's able to profile you, before long, Kaczynski was able to evaluate a person better than the average work colleague, merely on the basis of 10 Facebook likes. 70 likes were enough to outdo what someone's friends knew about them. 150 what their own parents knew, and 300 likes showed them a profile of them better than what their own partner knew about them. Right? So, all of a sudden, they had effectively broken Enigma for every single individual. Now again, this is about lists of data and effectively looking at a person in terms of an ID number, right? This isn't saying, I know who Lance Dobson is, I know who Jeff Tilley is, and this kind of thing. It's, here's an ID number, and this ID number that represents this person is, has these characteristics based on their Facebook likes. They're in, they have this race, this religion, this political preference, this skin color, this preference for alcohol, etc., just based on their Facebook likes. And so, yeah.
Now that it's no longer paired with surveys that are more, I assume, more specific about what they want to know, is there any check on the interpretation? Because, for instance, now there's not just like versus not liking something. There's an angry face, there are all the emojis, and a lot of times I'll say, and other people will say, I don't know whether to put angry because I'm upset about this thing that you wrote about, or like because I'm glad about what you said. So, how in the world did they interpret that?
It's a good question that I haven't followed up on. Okay. It's one that I haven't looked into. If this is purely based on likes, and it's interesting because I'm curious about that all the time.
They ignore the other emojis?
I think that depends on what the data say. I think you have to look at what the data say. So I think it's a good question. Yeah?
So is it only based on likes, or is it based on like what articles you read and don't necessarily like? Like for someone who doesn't click like a lot, does it still know because they spend their time reading these types of articles, or do you know about that?
From what I understand, it's on likes, but there also is a bit of proprietary aspect to this. And so, as far as Michael Kaczynski's study itself, it was purely based on likes. And
before the emojis.
Yeah, well, this was 2012, right? And those just came out a year ago.
Yeah.
And so there's also, yeah.
So we didn't get the memo about the time change. So just on this one question, could you explain what you're answering?
Do you want to do a quick recap? So we're talking about how Donald Trump used Facebook profiles to identify what people's personalities are, right? And so we're talking about what the methodology was behind using the Facebook data to come to those conclusions, right? Is that fair from what I covered for the last few minutes? So, as far as Kaczynski, it was based on likes, but if we go back through the timeline, Michael Kaczynski basically did a study. He was at Warsaw University and published a study, and his was on Facebook likes, but there was an analytics company that wanted to recruit him, and he ultimately backed out because he didn't want to get involved in the political process, and he felt that he actually, after he published the data, he felt really scared of what people could do with this data, right? And so this company decided they're called Cambridge Analytica, and they decided to create their own version of it. And we don't have the exact methodology that they used, but we do know that they used psychometrics based on a couple of presentations that they did. And so we do know that, but we don't know if they used likes or if they incorporated more into it, especially with some of the more sophisticated, more complicated, things that are happening on Facebook, right? So I don't know, and I'm sorry, I don't know. But effectively, if we go back, we looked at the millions of psychometric surveys that people took, and then their Facebook profiles. All of a sudden, we had two huge, literally millions of data points to work off of that we could create the key to break Enigma with, right over here. The psychometric key, so that we could take somebody's Facebook profile and determine their psychometric profile without having to take an actual pedantic survey online. It's all being done and being updated on a live basis for literally everyone who's on Facebook and who uses it regularly. Yeah, so now we have the psychometric key, and now they have your psychometric profile through Facebook. Now, the funny thing is, immediately after, 2 weeks after he published this study that he did, a few weeks later, Facebook changed the default setting the privacy setting to private, so that they couldn't automatically get access to profiles. Now, they got permission from people, and but people can still get access to your Facebook profile data if you allow them access. Like when you go through it'll ask are you okay if this app has access to your Facebook profile data and stuff like that. You still have to go through that, but Facebook already kind of tried to tighten that up a little bit. And so Facebook is aware of it. The funny thing is, as soon as he released it, the next day he got threat of a lawsuit as well as a job offer, both from Facebook. Yeah. And so,
Take this job or we'll kill you.
yeah, exactly. So let me just take 2 quick minutes. I know I'm basically out of time. But the question is, what do you do with this data now? And I'll skip this one real quick and come back to it. But Facebook is really simple. If you've ever had a chance, anybody can literally do this. If you want to go in and see what type of data Facebook has on you as an individual or the people around you, you can take a segment of the population and you can say, you know, within Utah, how many people are male, how many are female, how many people make this much money, how many people make this much money, how many people have this party affiliation. They have that segmented out already in Facebook, right? And so if you have access to all the people across Facebook and you know what a person's certain Facebook profile means and what their psychometric profile is, and then you have the ability to target that person on Facebook, you can do extremely targeted and personalized messaging. For example, let's see if I have it here. Do I have it? Here's an example. Psychologically categorized voters can be differently addressed. So that means if you have a certain segment, a certain group of people, you're not going to tell someone who hates guns how great it is to go duck hunting, right? And so psychologically categorized voters can be differently addressed based on the example of gun rights, the Second Amendment. For a highly neurotic and conscientious audience, the threat of a burglary and the insurance policy of a gun, and they showed an image on the left, they showed an image of an intruder smashing a window. And so if you have a group of people who are neurotic, but they're conscientious, they're terrified of losing their guns, show them a picture of a burglar breaking a window, right? Or if you know that someone is really interested in family, but they also love guns, show a picture of a dad and his daughter duck hunting, right? And so you're able to target very specific groups, and they have you nailed down exactly what kind of person you are, right? And so, one sec. Let me just cruise through this really fast. And so, just to really quickly throw a couple arguments against myself really quickly, because there are a couple things that I read, even from Michael Kaczynski himself, that said, it's not big data analytics that wins an election, it's a politician, right? And I get that. And especially when you look at, if Hillary Clinton had won, then we'd be going, Elon Kriegel is awesome. Look at how good a job he did with big data. It's kind of like the phenomenon where, you know, if 2 countries go to war, the winning country has the history in the books for the rest of eternity, right? And so it's true. And, you know, the margin of electoral victory was really small. And the margin of the popular victory didn't even go in Trump's way. So that's there I totally get that. But these are the ways that Trump approached it, and he was able to get key states, right? He was able to get key places to fall in his favor. And so if I were to quickly say, what are things that you can understand about what are affecting you on a daily basis, it's how they're taking a lot of that psychometric data and marrying up to things that you're doing on a daily basis, right? So all of your personal data, when you go buy from Target, when you go to Big 5 Sports and ask for your zip code, when you go to any company that has, if you register online with like a personal profile of some kind, they have personal data on you. And when you accept the terms and conditions, it says we can sell your data. We're not going to sell your name and your social security number, but we will sell probably your zip code and all of your shopping preferences, what types of things you like to buy, and from those things that you like to buy, possibly what your political preferences are, what your sexual preferences are, what your food preferences are, all those kinds of things, to advertisers like me who can use those to market to you, right? And so, if you were to sum up in 1 or 2 sentences what Trump did, even though Hillary came into the election with a much more data-heavy, much more social media-heavy focus than Trump did, he was able to look at people not from a demographic standpoint, just looking at male versus female or state versus state, because obviously 2 black guys who live in Miami are going to view gun rights differently depending on their history, right? And if you have that psychometric profile, you know how to target that person differently than just target black guys in Miami, right? Which was kind of the way that people were doing it. And so he was able to get the why beneath the why as to how to target people. So, I'm out of time. What was your question?
Take the election out of it, just as far as, all the personal shopping, web browsing.
Yep. So back to
stuff
marketing.
used. That never really bothered me much because I figured they're gonna sell ads, and I'd rather see ads that might be relevant to me, and sometimes find something that I wanna
That's the primary.
buy, so.
That's the primary. By the way, that's the primary argument that I have when I talk about what I do, because you don't want to see somebody marketing Viagra to you every single day.
Right.
Which, a company with a lot of money will just market to you over and over and over. But if you're like, hey, I hate Viagra ads, because I don't need Viagra ads, then, give me something that is relevant that I might actually buy. So, anyway, sorry.
Right, but I'm still surprised by how often it's just completely off. And I take the time on Facebook to click on the thing, don't show this ad, or why am I seeing this ad, and answer the questions and all that. And so I'm giving them more information to make it more accurate, just because it's gonna be less annoying to me.
Mhm.
But yeah, it is kind of alarming to see that a small but key demographic spread out in enough electoral districts. I think it's not just this kind of data, but combined with the electoral maps
Totally.
and the.
Oh yeah, they took all this data and they layered it all over their political data that they have.
That's what's alarming, that they were able to take advantage of I'm forgetting the word, where the gerrymandering and stuff.
You know that big data like this plays into gerrymandering for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I don't know, so where do we go from here?
Well, let me answer a few questions and then let's wrap it up with that.
Do we have reason to believe that these companies, like say Trump's team, whoever they use, did this research on their own, or they go through an intermediary like Facebook, like we could do? Like I could go and, like you say, I want to target non-religious people in Utah County that have families through Facebook on my own. Do we have a reason to believe that that's what this company did, or did they, give apps that you had to grant permission to, and then they mined the data themselves?
It's a really good question, and it's part of the data buying and selling, right? So one thing that I've been getting involved with more, and in fact, I'm flying out to San Francisco this week to train on some more software that Adobe recently bought. It's not secret or anything. You can go look up TubeMogul, which is a video marketing company that Adobe just bought. And effectively what TubeMogul does, and what a software that Adobe already had, but has decided to augment with some of this additional software, is it's basically a hub. It's one central hub for all sorts of data sources, right? So if you have a website and you're selling shoes, and which I have a couple clients who sell shoes, and they're actually just shoe companies. You have a lot of data that you collect on your website itself using analytics tools, right? You can see what pages people go to. You can see what pages people are buying from, what pages people are completely leaving. Like as soon as they get there, they leave and they don't need those pages. And you're able to get a lot of profile data on these individuals. Again, this is Jimmy Dean, age 25. It's a number, right? It's an ID number, like 25 character numbers. You don't know who they are, but this ID, this person exists. And you're able to see, what is this person's shopping habits? What do I know about them, right? And so if you know that this person has purchased within the last 30 days based on the information you have of them, which is largely based on cookies and browsers, and we can talk about those in a minute if that's interesting to you. But if you know that someone has purchased within the last 30 days, and you generally know that people repurchase after 35 days, that means on day 33, you're going to start bombarding them with ads. Right? You're going to start getting those in front of their face, so they go, oh, I need those again, right? I have another company who does a personal, like a toiletry service. I'm not going to say what, because then that would give away who they are. But it's something that people generally purchase every month to a few months to a year kind of thing. And so when I consult with this company, I go, all right, how often are these people buying? Can we identify certain products that people are buying on a regular basis? And can we remarket to them, which is a common term, remarketing or retargeting? Can we retarget these people after a certain amount of time and be like, hey, here we are again, come buy from us, don't go to our competitors, You know, that kind of thing. So that's a common thing. Well, what if we're able to find out more information about these people? What if we're able to target, you know, someone who, you know, right now I'm referencing a little bit more of like Google search marketing because I work a lot in Google. But if we were to look at just random ads out on the internet, which is kind of the final frontier of digital marketing right now, it's probably going to change as we get like, you know, wearables and things like that. If, you know, Google Glass or anything like that becomes big, or augmented reality. But, you know, if we look at display ads, just a random, if you go to like the New York Times, there's usually like a big banner at the top of the website, or like YouTube, like there's a big banner at the top of the website. And companies like the ones that I work with, for every 1,000 times that shows up, a few dollars for that to show up at the top there. And so it's like, do we want that ad to show up to every single person who comes to that website? If I'm selling shoes, if I'm selling designer shoes from JCPenney, I don't work with JCPenney, but if I sell designer shoes from JCPenney, do I want to sell designer shoes from JCPenney to someone who's going to the New York Times who I know is a trucker? I don't want to do that. That wouldn't make sense. So I want to find people whose browsing habits that other companies have dug up and they put together. I want to find out if they are going to have a higher propensity to buy. If they do, let's get in front of them and we'll have a higher conversion rate. We can, for every 100 times somebody shows up on the website, if we can get 10 people instead of 5 to purchase, and that turns into $1,000 instead of 300, then we've got the right people in front of us, right? And so that's how we try and do that. Yeah.
Okay, so I know from a little bit of marketing history I have that back in the 50s or something, or before that, where they had subliminal advertising, put like subliminal sex or religious overtones into ads, and then it became, this subliminal stuff became illegal after a while. So this is even more targeted, more specific, more powerful, and getting results than the subliminal stuff does. Is there any relationship between those two things? Do you think there'd be control over it at some point, or is it just a free-for-all, whoever has the power?
I think it's a really good question, and there are watchdog groups out there to make sure that companies like Adobe are, you know, keeping their hands clean, keeping their noses clean, whatever the phrase is. And I think it's important for there to be companies like that, you know, because I'm on kind of both sides of the spectrum. You know, I work as kind of the advertiser for a company like Adobe, and I want to have a lot of that data, but then I also work kind of on the other side from Google, who has all of that data, right? And they have a lot of control over what we see. And there's a lot of companies who keep a close eye on Google because they can influence the world in really, really powerful and sometimes what can be really dangerous ways. And I think it's important to look at how much effect the ads that we're looking at on a daily basis are having on our lives, right? I mean, I think it was a common thing for a lot of people who were Hillary supporters to be like, I didn't see anybody on Facebook liking Trump, right? But as soon as Trump was elected, I remember going, what am I missing? And so I went and I realized kind of slowly over time, I had unfollowed a lot of friends. And I think that Facebook also has a desire and a motivation to stop showing a lot of that and to get the stuff in front of us that they think we want, right? It's like watching WALL-E, the Disney show, where you had people, you know, very portly people on their chairs with screens in front of them showing everything that they wanted. And then people are like, and then those two people are like, oh my gosh, look at all these things around us. I had no idea this existed, right? And I think that phenomenon kind of happened. And so there is kind of we're going to show you things to influence you, to get you in this direction. And, you know, like the display ads that we're talking about, where it's like, this isn't even what I like kind of thing. There is a degree of we're going to try and influence you by simply having things in front of you, right? Even if we know this is marginally related to what your browsing habits have been, we're still going to try and get this in front of you in hopes that it sparks something so you're like, I do need this other thing, so maybe, right? And we get a lot of return traffic and a lot of people coming and buying through that way. So it is almost kind of deceptive in some ways, and I understand that it can seem kind of deceptive. And there is the idea that if we can just get something in front of your face, that it will influence how you think. And I mean, in a lot of ways, that's what Trump did, right? Just the fact that he was able to say things, crooked Hillary, crooked Hillary, crooked Hillary, that was his methodology. of getting that stuck in people's heads. And that's kind of the same concept behind a lot of display marketing, where you just get things in front of their face. It's not as subliminal in the same, like technically subliminal, like they would do with video, where you quickly flash something where you didn't consciously recognize it, but your subconscious saw it. But I think there is a lot of psychological studies have shown that if you just get an ad in front of people, even if it's something you don't remember, if it's just on the website, your subconscious can pick that up, right? So if you have a site that may have a banner, a headline banner, and then a couple ads on the site that you may not quite remember, it might stick. And there are studies that have shown that. Yeah.
Yeah, Daniel Dennett says that if you say it, read it, or see it, it makes another copy in your brain.
Yeah.
The more exposure you get to the brand or the shoe or the thing, the more familiar you become with it, the more you'll like it in the end. These biases are kind of unconscious for us, but I had a question for you.
Yeah.
Got any recommendations for digital defense against these online dark arts?
All right, so let's bring it full circle to your question, right? Which is, what can we do about it, right? Or did you have another question?
Well, where do you go next?
Where do you go?
Oh, just a quick insert for that. When they show me ads I don't want to see, that just pisses me off. And when I see ads over and over that I don't want to see, I win DVR.
Mhm.
And so, I will fight back, and I will get off Facebook at some point if it just becomes too annoying.
And that's why,
A lot of people do.
even with the acquisition, like that I was just talking about, Adobe purchasing the software, there are more and more. If you go to the article, this was kind of the catalyst that got me looking at this more in terms of what I do in my job. This was on a website called searchengineland.com. It's a highly reputable website if you ever want to keep up in the search engine marketing world and see how people are marketing on Google and Bing and Yahoo. Which is a huge multi-billion-dollar a month industry. But in there, it talks about what companies are trying to do to target it more. And go read it. It's gonna blow your mind. It probably not as much as it blew my mind because I'm in the industry and I shared it with multiple of my colleagues, and they emailed me back and they were like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, because it is kind of every time I delve into this, I get a little bit of an existential crisis, right? Because I'm like, am I deceiving people? I work in marketing, like Dilbert makes fun of marketing all the time, and it's like, oh, it's just getting people to buy stuff that they don't want, which I don't think is true, right? I think that marketing does a good job because it gets things in front of people where the things that they want, But I think that there is a degree of, I was just reading a BuzzFeed on, things that people bought on Amazon that were deceptive. Like, this guy bought a rug, a throw rug that was supposed to be like a 10 by 12 throw rug, right? But he didn't pay attention to the dimensions, even though it said nice throw rug and it had a picture of a living room. It said the dimensions are like the size of a bathroom mat, right? And so that's deceptive marketing. And this stuff, I think, flirts with that line, right? And I think I can say that, especially in the industry that I'm in. And I think it's good for people like me to talk about it and to be talked to about it, and hear concerns about it. Because I think it's something that when privacy and invasion of privacy becomes a concern, I think it's a good conversation to have. And I think that companies like Adobe want to make sure that good conversations are being had about it. Yeah.
So before you answer what we can do, I want to ask a question about what the problem is.
Okay.
One more. So we know that as we Google things, then Google will send us more things that agree with what we're Googling, and so we get compartmentalized.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that these ads, if we're only getting ads for things we like, and we're only getting articles for things we agree with, we start thinking the whole world and us agree, and we get more and more compartmentalized and not joined together as humanity. Is that the big issue here?
Divide and conquer?
It is a huge issue. And I think that it's one that if we're going to say where do we go from here and start to tie that into this question, it's to start maybe finding where that compartment, the edges of that compartment are. and stepping outside of that. As soon as Trump was elected, it was so uncomfortable because I really hurt some people with some things I put on Facebook, and I felt really bad about those. And I went to go look at, like, to go to their Facebook profiles, and ultimately send some messages to them, being like, I was kind of an asshole, and I apologize, you know. I looked at their Facebook profiles, and the things that they are posting, reading, are totally different from what I'm reading and what I'm seeing. What they're sharing on their Facebook profiles is totally different. And I was like, I have not done a good job, even though I'm a marketer and I know the sphere. I have not done a good job of being aware of people who are in my outgroup as far as politics went. And so I think that being aware of that is a big first step. You don't have to agree with them, obviously, that would be good, but I think that being aware of that is a good first step. As far as maybe where we can go from here, am I doing all right with time, or am I way over?
3 o'clock.
Wait, is it 3? Okay. How many kids do we have downstairs?
About 4 probably.
4? Okay.
Or 5.
If you have kids, I'm going to release you right now, so we can make sure that Tiara is able to take off. But I'm happy to answer a couple more questions and tie this in a little bit. Can you check on Tiara? Is that cool? Cool. So I think there's a couple of things. Let me answer your question real quick in 1 second. But if we're to talk about where to go, I think that there are a couple of different categories and things. Maybe you have something specific in mind as far as where, like, how you want that question answered. Do you? Or is it just what do we do?
Again, it's not the marketing that bothers me, because if people help me to find the things I'm interested in, that's a service as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
It crosses the line when it deceptively convinces me to buy things that I don't need, but everyone has to use some self-responsibility and self-restraint when it comes to, like, online shopping or whatever. But when it comes to sort of the civil society and the public sphere and our politics, if we are, talking past each other and can't even agree on the definition of facts and what are facts and what aren't facts, that's a huge problem. And that goes way beyond, Googling. That's what people are watching on, which news shows people are
Correct,
watching.
and a lot of that is way out of our control, for sure.
So I don't know. I mean, personally on Facebook, I have tried very hard to hang on to my friends whose politics are very different from mine. And sometimes I've had to, unfollow people because it's too triggering, and I don't want to go and see something nasty that I will regret. But I also notice I almost never get engagement from people I really know with different politics. The ones that I get are the occasional, asshole troll that I don't know, and then I just block them. I mean, I might dialogue a little bit with them, but if they're just determined to be a jerk, goodbye. But so I feel sad that even though I have the desire to interact with people constructively and to learn from other people's opinions, and I have challenged people who have come and criticized me. Who online will criticize my posts and make fun of me and my friends. But when I've challenged him to add something constructive to the conversation, he just zips right up. So maybe this is more Holly's thing, but I feel frustrated that it's, even when you try, and I try really hard to be constructive in my back and forth, it seems like people just want to retreat to their corners, and I'm not leaving myself out of that. But so that I know that's a whole huge area that I brought up, but that's what concerns me about the political use of this data.
Yeah, me too. And I think that the first thing people need to realize is just to realize that it's there, right? And maybe noodle on that for a while, and just realize that. I don't know. This is the part where I think that if you have somebody who's pointing to fake news, which I think is a little overplayed right now, But I think that when we talk about the news that we're getting on Facebook, I think that the idea of fake news and that we're getting things tailored to what we want to see is kind of a real thing. And to recognize that from a nuanced angle, what the Donald is saying about fake news has a nugget of truth to it. I think that otherwise it's full of shit, but I think that there is some reality to that, right? Sorry, offense to the video. But I think that there is something to that where it's like, maybe I am seeing just what I want to see. For example, when the whole handshake thing happened with the German Prime Minister, I forget her name. Thank you. And that's on me for not remembering that. But you know, there were two separate perceptions of what happened there, right? It's like, oh, he didn't shake her hand, but he did. But it was after. It wasn't in front of the cameras, because there are photos of him shaking her hand as she's getting into the limo. And a couple other times, right? And so on the one side, you have people who are like, he didn't shake her hand. And then on the other hand, you have, of course he shook her hand. But it's probably somewhere in the middle, because he intentionally didn't shake her hand in the meeting, but he did shake her hand eventually. So it's not as cut and dry as we want it to be. I'm not saying he's right. I'm just saying that a lot of people saw what they wanted to see. And that's the power that marketing and media can have when it's tailored to what people want to see. Right? Yeah.
I think I remember Obama had the same kind of didn't back or maybe back as a prime minister.
Yeah.
And then all the other people on the hate Obama side were mad and made a deal of it.
Yeah.
And that was years ago, but is politics the new religion? People get really keen.
That's a sticky question, dude. I think it's a good question, though. I'm just playing. No, I think it's. I think that. I mean, even if you talk with a lot of the secularists, a lot of the famous secularists, they talk about how politics has become ideological and dogmatic, which I think is obvious, but I think in a lot of ways it's true. I think that's what it is. What was your question?
Well, it's kind of changed a little bit. I'll make a comment. I watched CBS this morning today, and their lead story was on the political divide. And they had Sean Hannity there, they were interviewing Hannity, and I forget who was interviewing Sean Hannity, and he was kind of mad at Sean Hannity. He said, listen, you're dividing our country. He said, Sean Hannity said, no, people should know I'm entertainment. I'm not fair and balanced, I'm not showing both sides, I'm showing my side, I'm entertainment. He says, no, I'm mad at you, you're dividing the country because you're so good at what you do that it gets blurs the lines. So I went on to say it was very good. It's like a 10-minute piece if you watch online. It was Ted Koppel, sorry, Ted Koppel, yeah.
Yeah, Kennedy may be fair and balanced, but his network.
Sure. Well, anyway, but all those guys, like from all sides, anyway, they're entertainment. They're not from both sides. I guess there's also like a rule. I think it was passed around the Reagan area where you didn't have to be fair and balanced anymore. And that's when all the right-wing radio sprouted out. Because the media used to have to show both sides of the story, and they said no more. And then
I wasn't aware of that. I should look at that. That's really interesting.
It's a really good piece. I guess I was going to ask something about. I think you're going to do this. If you see ads you like, you're okay with it. I would love to reach people who need I operate in my business.
Yeah.
I all the time.
It's like being a matchmaker.
The most common comment I get when people come see me is, Martin, I talked to you earlier. I get that all the time, but they don't know I exist. So if I can find a way to find my target demographic, especially those approaching retirement, that's ideal. Yeah. So I think it can be used for good. Now, if I lie to them, if I deceive them, if I steal their money, of course it's bad. It can be, I guess, good or bad. Right?
Yeah, and I think that's where we can't necessarily look at marketing and big data, as an evil thing. It just is, and it's what people do with it, right? Now, there's some ethics behind that. Even behind just saying, well, it's just what people do. Because what if the people in power do things to make it so that other people who are good can't have access to it, right? That's a real possibility, right? So I think it's a good conversation, and it's mildly, yeah.
Yeah, just a quick comment. It's if Bob knows more about Jim than Jim knows about Bob, Bob can control their
Exactly.
communication.
Yeah.
If Bob knows more about Jim than Jim knows about himself, Bob can enslave Jim.
You can, yeah. And that's where, talking about where do we go from here, that's where even though I'm in marketing watchdog groups and ethics groups are really important. And making sure that they keep the marketing world in check. And that, when companies like my company or the companies that I consult with are using this data, that we don't use PII, personal identifiable information, right? That we're not saying, this is Jim with this social security number who lives right here, that kind of thing. We are classifying him into a large group using an ID number, right? And so, or that their personalized information is encrypted, right? Those kind of practices. And a lot of that wouldn't have come around if it weren't for watchdog groups and legislation to make sure that happened. So that's really important, yeah.
So the link between your psychometric profile, your behavior online, and your actual identity, at what point is that severed? Is it when they gather the data, they already have no access to your personal identifiable information, or they then put in safeguards that we're not going to look at that part, we're just looking at the psychometric profile? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure if I think I get where you're going, but I'm not sure if I quite understand what the question is.
Okay, Andrew, Google knows it's you, but when they sell that data to other people, they sell a number. They sell a number that says interested in shoes, or has expressed any other interest in this thing you're trying to sell.
Is that your question?
So is Google the only organization that could
Google
match up,
knows,
that could work
Facebook
backwards
knows.
from the
Facebook knows
Oh,
for sure who you are.
Google, Facebook,
The ones you
any
spend
large
most time
retailers,
on, give your name to, they
Home
know.
Depot knows, especially now, to give, show a little bit of how the sausage is made. Adobe just came out with a co-op, data co-op, a year ago exactly, because their large tech conference just ended last week. And it basically said, any company who wants to try and get access to more of all of their shoppers, all the profiles that they have, you can basically plug into a hub, and all these other companies who also have access to those same people, because someone who shops on Home Depot doesn't just stay on Home Depot, they go to Target, they go to Lowe's, they go to JCPenney's, they go everywhere, right? And so if all these companies start plugging in, then all of a sudden, we can start filling in gaps where someone may not have completed their profile over here, they may have put another piece in over here, right? But all of that plug, where the plug actually goes in, is an encrypted profile where it's just a number. It's like a 25-digit ID number or something like that, And so the only person who can see your data, unless it's hacked, obviously, because we've seen those cases, is you or anyone who you give access to your profile. But as far as the people who work in the company, like me at Adobe, all I see is what's called a marketing cloud ID. And it's like a 40-digit number with numeric numbers and alphanumeric. It's an alphanumeric string, right?
But it doesn't just refer to someone like me, it refers
No,
to me.
it's an individual.
Yeah.
So theoretically, if someone did have access, they could. It's true. Someone could decrypt that and find it. But that is why there are entire divisions of Adobe whose job it is to make sure that data is secure. There is a huge workforce at Adobe whose job is data security.
What about if legislation changes and they're required to release that info, then they would have that?
If they're required to release someone's personal identifiable information?
Yeah, it's because we've seen smaller cases of that happening. Not with things that are hacked, but
Such as?
trying to think here. Browser histories through your ISP, through pirating. And so they take it that way and say that Comcast has to release Jim Jones down the street who's been piracy, and they want his name and phone number and address.
So we're talking about, just to make sure I'm on the same page, in this case we're talking about people who have broken the law in some ways, and so we should be able to access their data because of some law that they've broken.
Right.
But if I were to take what I think I'm hearing and apply that further is that it sounds like what if legislation came out that said that data could be released even for someone who didn't break the law, right? We're screwed. I mean, that's one I'm not sure about.
We know this
Yeah, they
administration
already
loves
have
making
that
companies now.
information on every one of us. They've got some special
Yes, they're
profiles.
discreet, they kill people in the shadows.
Yeah, well, when we're dead, we won't know we're dead. They'll hit us every time.
So the only answer
Or
is
we'll
to
be
get
in
off
Matrix.
time.
We could
Big
go down.
batteries. Sorry, what?
So, it's safer to stay offline, I guess.
Well, I mean, so if we're to talk about, what can we do about this? It's like, well, should I get off Facebook? Should I, if you wanted to make it so that no one had your information and that you went completely digital dark, and try to erase everything, delete all your profiles, everything, it would make surfing online really hard, first of all. And again, it would mean that you're probably going to get Cialis ads in front of you all the time, Which, if that's what you want, then, that's fine. But I mean, you're going to get a lot of irrelevant ads. And, you can use browsers that have ad blockers. That's an option, and that's a viable option. And one that I wouldn't blame anybody for using for. It can block all of the display ads that I would try and put in front of you.
How effective is using a VPN or encrypting your traffic through servers?
I mean, they do the job. They're starting to get outlawed in some places, in some companies. And so, what's that? Not ad blockers, VPNs. In fact, Google doesn't allow for advertising of VPN services anymore because VPNs in their own way can be deceptive because you can say that you're somewhere else and log in, pretend that you're in France and get around. They can be tricky enough themselves. I think that VPNs serve a good purpose. I use a VPN for work and for some other things, but I mean, it can help in some ways, I think. I think that ad blocker is probably going to be one of the better ways, but I mean, if you want to erase your digital profile, especially from, companies being able to use it, you're going to have to go and it's going to require a lot of legal footwork to get everything erased. You're going to have to go to these companies and ask that your information get removed. So that means you're going to have to go to largely every single company that you've ever registered a profile on and ask them to do that. And you're going to have to try and dig through your memory bank to find that. You'll have to deactivate and then delete your Facebook profile, your Twitter profile, your Google Plus profile, your YouTube profile, and then hope that you don't get Cialis and Luga commercials all the time when you're browsing. So it's tricky, and I think that the best thing that we can do is make sure that we're aware of it, and if we want to try and do more, to get involved with watchdog groups and make sure that companies like Adobe are being ethical. So, probably last question.
I'm just wondering if you
I'm getting
can
tired.
tie it together for me a little bit.
Okay.
Our likes helped Trump win because he could tell who his people were and who his people were not. And the people he knew were not his people, he started to ignore them, right? And focus all his attention on those people that did like something is at one time or another, and then he just bombarded them with whatever more of him that they could possibly like. Is that what happened?
I think if I were to nuance that a little bit, I would say that he looked for the fence sitters. He looked for the people who were on the edge about certain issues, and he was able to sway them into, if this is a big deal to you, get your butt out there and vote for me, right? And I didn't even read this quote that I had, but throughout the election, a huge concern that people had were like, he's totally inconsistent. You can't nail him down on anything,
Lying
right?
about everything.
He says this, and then he says this, and they're totally disparate. They contradictory in every way. But we find that it was totally on purpose. Trump's striking inconsistencies, his much criticized fickleness, and the resulting array of contradictory messages suddenly turned out to be his greatest asset, a different message for every voter. The notion that Trump acted like a perfectly opportunistic algorithm following audience reactions is something that the mathematician Kathy O'Neill observed in August of 2016. It was totally intentional.
So basically, we're stupid. That's what that's saying.
Yeah. He's smart, or was it, that's just his personality that happens to maybe fit.
He's savvy.
Well,
I think it means those things. I think it means this is the state of the art. Clinton did this state by state, county by county in his elections. There's a really great documentary called The Century of the Self, and psychologists and practitioners of influence have been pushing this art forward. And I think you see these 50-50 elections so much because both teams use really advanced stuff. They're getting down into deep psychology of what really triggers and motivates people.
And psychometrics.
Yeah, and they're using the psychometrics. When it was Obama's campaign, all of the door-to-door knockers had little iPads with info on you.
They talk about
how many
that
dogs do you have?
in this article.
What your family looks like, roughly, and whether you'd be someone who was going to slam the door if they knocked on your door. And so they were targeting it, and I don't see it so much as Trump managed to do this because he had some extra. I mean, these people who do this deep targeting stuff, they're going to use it during the next elections, and people are going to buy. Both parties are going to buy services from them. And if there's an advantage to be had, the other team's going to use it as well, or they're going to always fail. So any kind of advantage that one side gets is going to be worn away by, call it market forces or something, until the point of it now is that it used to be state by state. In like Michigan, it was all the moms thought that their buses were going to slide off the road in the winter, and so they wanted to have all the school bus drivers to have cell phones. That was Clinton's big issue for that state, and it was targeted by state back then before the internet. Now the internet's done this thing where we're down to like a focus group size of one. They're speaking directly to what they think your big issue is, and that's more powerful. But
so you got all the single issue voters, basically.
I think the thing to talk about this for just a second, I think that what I would hear a lot of people who were Hillary supporters be like, he says one thing and then he says another thing, outwardly, on the TV. Not even like, because like even in this article, it talks about how people went out with iPads and they actually had the psychometric data layered onto that, and so they were able to go, this person is jittery about healthcare, so don't mention that we're going to repeal the Affordable Care Act to them, but talk about these other things, right? And so there was that, but Trump was on TV saying one thing, and then saying another thing, and then saying another thing, but what this points out is that he understood that people want to hear what they want to hear. And I think that other politicians know that because they're like that, but he was blatant about it, and it made a lot of Hillary supporters really upset because they're like, he's not consistent. And I think Hillary had some inconsistencies in a lot of ways, but he was very blatant about it. But it worked, right? And I think that it's not necessarily that people are stupid, I think it's that people aren't aware that we do kind of hear what we want to hear, right? It's kind of like, I forget who spoke 6 or so months ago here and showed the video. I think it was Kevin Van Horn talking about bias and how we see what we want to see. He showed a video of a murder scene. It was just a fake murder scene, and it would start over here, and it would pan over here, and it would pan back. And what Kevin said at first, he's like, how many changes happen in this video. And you're supposed to watch and see how many things change for the duration of the video. And when it starts over here, and then it pans over here, these people switch coats, switch hats, a black guy switches into a white guy, you know, stuff like that, and then you head back. And there were like 23 changes made in like a 10-second video. And it took, the only guy who was able to get something like 21 of those was a guy who quality checked Boeing airplanes. What's that?
People with Asperger's and autistic people might.
Probably got it, yeah. Yeah.
Don't know what people want.
But we see what we want, right? And we hear what we want. And I think that Trump knew that.
But if he said both of those, then we.
You only listen to the one you
Yeah, the
want
one
to
you
hear.
that
You
disagree
remember
with,
he
who's
said what you
putting out,
wanted to hear.
But who's gonna do that? Who's gonna filter that out?
We do it.
Stupid people.
Everyone does.
We didn't,
To some
right? We
degree.
didn't. We
I
had
never
to
did.
say both inconsistent things, and we went bullshit.
But it's because we didn't want to believe him, we already didn't like him. So we paid
So,
attention
I think
to
it's
his
just
choices.
Really?
just
Okay,
an edge.
this gets into another discussion. One sec, really quick. This is really interesting. If you ever get a chance to listen to the, I'm forgetting the podcast, but I know the podcast name is called "You Don't Know as Much as You Think You Know," or something like
You're
that.
not so smart.
You are not so smart. Thank you.
Right.
Did you listen to this one? It's like the
The bullshit
kickback.
generator.
No, it's not that one. It's one of his more recent podcasts from just a few weeks ago. But it's talking about if people are presented with information that goes against what they already believe. Right?
Confirmation bias.
Yeah, they just filter it out.
I'm gonna go crazy. The interesting thing is they took a group of people. I'm gonna say what the bigger study was, and I'm gonna look at a smaller one really quick. In the bigger study, they took people who they knew had a strong belief about something, and they fed them two pieces of information. Or they took two separate groups who they knew had a strong belief about something. If it was like they were strong gun supporters, for example. I keep saying guns because that's top of mind right now. But like, you know, both this one group of people had a strong belief in gun rights, right? Then they took that group, separated into two pieces, and they said, okay, we're going to feed information to this group that is just kind of that agrees with what they say, right? It's like the study came out that said that gun rights are important because X, Y, Z. And then this group was given information that was against what they believe, right? Well, this study came out that said that if gun rights persist in the way they do, people are going to die at X, rate, kind of thing. And they actually found that, and they did surveys before and after to do a delta on how strongly they believed in this. And what they found is that people who were fed information that goes against what they believed stronger than the people who were given information. What's that?
Backfire.
Backfire! Thank you! It's the backfire effect. Because when we go on Facebook and we see that somebody posts something about whatever they believe in, and we're like, no, look at this article. It emboldens them, it retrenches them in what they believe in, which is important for people who want to get involved politically, who, want to get involved in religious discussions, and it's a sticky conversation where you can't just throw out something that contradicts what they think because it may actually make them believe in what they believe stronger.
Well, what about nuance? Don't people have an interest in nuance? Like if somebody says, oh, guns are so bad or guns are so good. I'm smart enough to be able to go, hey, there are definitely two sides to this. In fact, they're probably it's multifaceted in so many different aspects, and why wouldn't they want to explore all of it rather than just go, oh, I'm a black thinker or I'm a white thinker or whatever.
And they probably will. They probably just won't in front of a bunch of people where they know an audience is watching where they can get proved wrong and make it look like a fool.
I would so much rather go, I don't know, rather than just like.
Well, you're the exception, Holly. Come on. Yeah.
A comment, I watched Bill Maher Friday night. He had it was an epic show. If anyone who didn't see it but has access to HBO, I definitely watch it. But he made a comment at some point about, he said, about the people that voted for Trump, and a lot of people have made the point that the healthcare bill that just was polled on Friday would have hurt Trump supporters disproportionately. And, so why were they supporting him? And he said, come on. And they played lots of clips of, Donald Trump saying the things that he said, and then later tonight that he said about what he was going to do in healthcare. And he said, if someone tells you that they're going to cover everybody, and it's going to be much, much better, and it's going to be much, much cheaper, it's going to happen really fast after the election, and he said, come on, you have some responsibility for being a dope if you believe a story like that. But I guess there are a lot of dopes that don't, and I don't mean to castigate people, but we need more critical thinking, and we need people to be able to evaluate arguments better and to reject the simplistic black-white.
I think that one of the biggest things that people need to do is they need to be aware of their own biases.
You've got the natural cognitive biases that are.
So the one that I was going to mention.
Because I'm persuaded by facts all the time, so I've been aware of this backfire effect since that study first came out, but
Did you
I know
listen
that I
to the
changed
podcast?
no, I'm gonna go home and do
I
that.
want you to so much, because it will blow your mind.
You're not so smart.
You are not so smart. I've heard it. Thank you for remembering. The separate study that they did, there are 3 episodes, by the way. He gets really in-depth about it. But he talks about 2 separate groups of people. Did you listen to it, or did I ask you that?
I can't remember now.
Okay. They do another study where they take 2 groups of people, and I'm going to butcher how this actually goes, which means you should go listen to the podcast. But they take 2 groups of people, and they want to study how people accept the results of information, right? And so they give people fake litmus paper, right? To do it was like a chlamydia test or something like that. Yeah, for pH testing, but it was specific for a certain disease to see if they had it, right? And so for one group of people, they were told that if the litmus paper turns purple, that means that you do have a health issue. For the people who were, and then the other group of people were told that if it doesn't turn purple, then you have whatever disease it was talking about, infection. And again, I'm going to butcher this, but for the people who got the result that they wanted, they immediately said, good, I'm good. But for the people who didn't get the result they wanted immediately, waited, and rechecked, and rechecked. Right? And so if we're presented with something that doesn't confirm our own bias, then we're inclined to be like, no, that's wrong. Oh, look at this article. This proves that wrong. But if we see something that we feel good about based on what we believe, we're like, good, I don't need to look into that further.
Yeah.
That's what that study shows. It's a limited study, I get that. But I think that it shows that if people have a confirmed set of beliefs and they see something that they feel confirms that, they probably won't look into it, right? Which is why a lot of people took what they heard and were like, yeah, I agree with it. Sounds good. And then they'd hear something else and be like, but he did say this, so I'm happy with that. So, I know that's inferring a lot on my part, but I think that it's largely true nowadays. So, go listen to that podcast. We went in a lot of directions today, so are there any last questions? Thanks for coming today. Appreciate your participation. It was lots of fun. Again, we're not meeting next week. We'll be meeting the next week after that to talk about tribalism. So please come and participate. Otherwise, you guys have a great week.